This is the Do-It-Yourself Guide to Business Buying. You're watching the Generating Deal Flow video. Welcome, business buyers. The goal of this video is generating deal flow, i.e. finding businesses to buy. I want to remind you these are full coverage videos. They aren't shorties. So grab yourself a coffee, right? We're going to be diving into the details. Let's roll up our sleeves and get started. If you're a business buyer, you have a deal funnel. And this video is about generating deal flow, i.e. finding deals to feed into that deal funnel. We're not talking about screening once they're in the funnel and they're working their way through it. No, this is about generating deals to feed into the funnel. We want to set targets, measure and track deal flow results. Of course, we're interested in quantity. It's easy to measure. We just directly count 5 deals, 8 deals, 11 deals, whatever it happens to be. Then we set a target. How many do we want to generate per week? 1, 2, 5, 10. It's up to you. It'll in part depend upon the resources you have, the time you've got available, and I guess your level of ambition as well. They'll all factor in. Quality is also important. We need a proxy for that. Some people use deal screening. They'll look at the deal source and determine how many pass screening and set a target. If it's 1 out of 5, it means for every 5 deals that are sourced, only 1 of them pass the screening criteria. That seems a little low. We might go a little higher. 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, totally up to you. It's about setting the target. It's not about what the target is. We want to track progress month to month, and setting goals helps us sustain deal flow. And we need consistent deal flow to be successful in business buying, no doubt about it. Where do we source deals from when we're generating deal flow? 3 areas: outbound leads, inbound leads, and leads we get from brokers. The difference is the selling signal we get in each case. With outbound, there is none. By definition, outbound is cold, unsolicited outreach. If we're looking at broker deals, we do have a selling signal, but it's one-to-many, meaning hundreds of people know the business is for sale, so I have some competition. If we're taking a look at inbound, we also get a selling signal, but this time it's one-to-one, which is nice because now we have exclusivity on a business for sale. That's where we want to be. I'd say inbound has the highest quality leads, brokers are the easiest leads to get, and outbound is the most random. We can run hot and cold for sure when it comes to outbound, but all of them can produce results. All are worth pursuing. So we have 3 sources of generating deal flow. Let's focus in on brokers first. What's involved in broker deal flow? Well, the first thing I want to note is that not all deals are worth pursuing when we're talking broker deals. You have to pick your spot. There's a limited number of deals that you can pursue. Let's call those viable deals. Outside of that, you might be wasting your time and effort. Now, of course, you can expand the number of viable deals in some circumstances. In others, they shrink. What does it depend on? In my opinion, it depends on the size of the closing payment. There is a relationship between them. If this gray bar is a seller payment structure, maybe you haven't figured out how you're financing your first business. You've given it no thought, but you're on some broker sites. You've seen some deals you like. You consider them all to be viable. Why couldn't you pursue any deal that appeals to you? And as long as you have no payment structure in place, that might be true. But if you're planning to put an offer in where the closing payment is 5% or less, and the seller note is 95% or more, that is going to affect things. The number of deals that are viable under that kind of a financing arrangement are limited. That's not good. That's not bad. That's just the way it is. I know people who have closed deals in exactly these circumstances, so it's definitely possible. I'm only trying to warn people off wasting a lot of time and effort trying to pursue a broker deal with a closing payment that's small, where you just know that the seller and the broker are not going to go along with it. So just be aware. And of course, as you increase the closing payment, you're going to increase the number of deals that are considered viable. And if you get to the point where the closing payment is 85 or 90% of the purchase price of the business, pretty much all deals are then viable, which is why SBA deals are so popular with sellers. It opens up the field to a lot more buyers. We just want to avoid situations where we have a small closing payment, but we're still pursuing all broker deals. In that kind of a situation, I think you're bound to be disappointed. That's not a winning hand. Broker deals are great, but you have to pick your spots. Be selective. Find a broker who's flexible. They're probably not going to get their whole commission on closing with a 5% closing payment. They'll have to defer something. We want businesses listed longer than 6 months, preferably longer than 8. That way the seller is realistic, they're motivated, throw in some urgency and distress. Bingo, we've got a deal we can close. So are brokers a good source of deal flow? Yeah, absolutely. But you have to play the game right. If you do, brokers are definitely worth pursuing. Just be selective and pick your spots. Now, where do you find broker deals? Well, all brokers have a website. Just visit that website to get started. Here's a partial list of brokers you can check out. Just a partial list. On Circle, you can find the links and also the full list. How do you get access from a business broker? You have to register on their broker website. Fill out the information page. They're going to ask you for some additional information. Make sure you provide it. That changes from broker to broker. And that way you'll get access to the businesses that are listed for sale. That's brokers. Definitely check it out. Next is outbound. Outbound leads, where we approach owners directly. This is unsolicited cold outreach. And when you're approaching owners directly, there's an extra step involved that makes it a little bit more challenging. Let's be honest, it's not hard to find business brokers. They're in plain sight. But how do we find owners that are interested in selling their business? I use a 5-step process. I'm going to share it with you. I got to find the target business. Then I have to identify the owner, then get the owner's contact information so that I can message the owner and then create a follow-up plan. And let's quickly go through all 5, starting with find a target business. Paid databases can be an option. ZoomInfo, D&B, those are the big ones. There's other ones as well. There are international ones like Global, Compass, and Dalton's. And the thing that people love about paid databases is the filtered searching that you can do. You can search against geographic location, company size, business, industry, products, you name it. Very, very helpful. The problem is it can be expensive. It's pricey. It's too expensive for most people to use as their main source of outbound prospecting. But in a limited way, paid databases can come in handy, and I know a lot of people that use them. We also have freely available company information. These are supplier sites like ThomasNet, IQS, and McRae's. There's other ones as well. You can't do filtered search on these, but they are useful to check industries, check verticals, check competitors, check companies that are selling certain products in certain areas. I find myself on these sites quite frequently, so do check them out if you haven't. Next is LinkedIn, where we use our personal and professional connections, the groups that we belong to, and Sales Navigator if we go in that direction. And lots of business buyers have success on LinkedIn. I know at least 5 people who have bought businesses that they sourced through LinkedIn connections. So make sure you give LinkedIn a good go. That's finding target businesses. Next, we have to identify the owner. What options do we have here? Well, there's the About Us section on the website. There's Google search. There's LinkedIn. If you want to take it up a notch, there are Secretary of State sites for most states. You can look at Open Corporates, the Chamber of Commerce. If you're international, we have Companies House in the UK, the Register of Business Owners in Ireland, and ONBUS here in Canada. If it's too difficult to find the owner, I would consider giving up. I say that half tongue-in-cheek. In my experience, when you have a hard-to-find owner that you really dig to find the information, but then you're doing cold outreach to try and buy their company, usually I don't get a good outcome there, so I find that really working hard to find the owner doesn't typically pay off, but that's identifying the owner. Now we have to get the owner contact information. What options do we have here? Well, it depends on how we plan to reach out. We have options. There's direct letters, there's email messages, telephone calls. There are direct messages on social media. Different people see success with different methods. If we're trying to contact someone with direct mail, well, it couldn't be easier to find the postal address, so that's not going to be a problem. If we're sending a direct message on social media, same thing, can easily do a social media search. Those are both pretty straightforward. If we want to email or telephone call, if you can't find it through simple search, you might need third-party tools. What third-party tools? Well, if we're talking email, Get Email, Hunter, Lucia, Apollo, Cellhack, Find Emails. Those are the 6 that I use. You input the name and domain, it will output the target's email. I think this is my favorite service in my tech stack. I use it all the time. Some of them offer monthly freebies in terms of the number of free emails they'll give you. And so if you combine a few of them and you're low volume, that might take care of it. That's how we get owner contact information. Next, we want to message the owner. Now, there is one potential issue here that I want to see highlighted and directly addressed, and that is the owner's position on selling, or the selling signal we're getting from that owner. With outbound, there really is no seller signal. We don't know for sure if the seller is definitely selling, definitely not selling, where they really are. Now, they'd be a great prospect if they were definitely selling. But many pre-retirement owners, in my experience, live right around here or even here. They encourage our interest. They're thinking about selling. It's on their mind, and they're even receptive to receiving an offer. So we get all kinds of encouragement. However, because we cold called them, The business owner is often thinking, you know what? I'm not shopping my business. You approached me. I didn't approach you. So they're thinking this better be a home run offer, or this better be a make me sell my business type offer, which can be a problem for us, especially if we're bargain hunting. And it's one of the hazards of cold outreach and outbound prospecting. The owner wants an offer that's so good that selling becomes irresistible. They want it to be your offer that provides the push to get them to the point where they're definitely selling. Well, that's not where we want to be. There's a big difference between a seller who will sell at a great price, i.e., make me an amazing offer, or a seller who is selling at the best price, meaning I'm selling my business one way or another, and I'm going to accept the best offer when I do. We're clearly interested in the second category more than we are the first. So we have to be cautious about interpreting selling signals when we're doing outbound prospecting. How is this related to messaging sellers? Just craft your message carefully. Personally, I like to avoid language or messaging that's focused on I'm interested in buying your business or I'd like to make an offer on your business. I find that raises seller expectations. Instead, I want to focus the message on have you ever thought about exiting the business? Do you have a plan to exit the business? I want them thinking about selling rather than thinking about me coming over the top with this huge premium offer. So understanding the selling signal, really important. Sometimes it's very weak when we're doing outbound prospecting. Sometimes it's very strong. Where should we be focusing our time and effort? That's worth some thought. I have to admit of being guilty of this in the past where I just get too involved with sellers who are curious about the value of their business, who are dabbling with the idea of selling, and it starts to become time consuming if you have more than one of them. Instead of focusing my time and effort on an owner who wants or needs to sell, period. Now, it's not always easy to tell the difference between them, but it is something that you will develop a feel for over time. And be on guard, put it on your radar, be aware. You want to be spending your time with outbound prospects where the selling signal is decent, not really weak. Next, cold outreach messaging, some helpful reminders. We have to capture the seller's attention. We got to break through. The recipient is skimming messages. No response is common. Multiple attempts are needed. They aren't rejecting our message. They're not paying any attention to it. You can pre-test copy and subject lines, but capturing the seller's attention should be the first and last thing you're thinking about when you're doing outbound prospecting. If I'm getting nowhere with someone, I'll very often use humor or novelty to gain attention. Especially with non-responders, I might try humor on the fourth or fifth message. Mr. Bean's always a favorite. Just a photo of Mr. Bean is usually enough to get people to smile or laugh. Yeah, some people consider it a bit sassy, but I'm really just trying for a good pattern interrupt. That's one of the ways that we can capture attention. You also want to be aware of scammer concerns because there's a lot of fringe people in the business buying space now. You need some way to establish your legitimacy using outside sources. Business owners want to be able to check you out quite apart from their interaction with you, so make sure you have that set up. Confidentiality is important. Yeah, sellers are sensitive to information leaks, of course. They don't want customers, employees, and suppliers to know they're thinking about selling. The only onus is on you to clearly address confidentiality in your messaging. Finally, make your language seller-centric. The seller is just not much interested in our dreams, hopes, and aspirations, so let's save them. Let's not go into all the reasons why we want to buy the company and what we hope to do and how it's going to realize our dreams. I sometimes see letters like that. They're very interested in their own dreams, hopes, and aspirations. So make your messaging about the seller. That's number 4, messaging the owner. Number 5, create the follow-up plan. What does follow-up mean in this context? Well, if we reach out to a prospect and we get a real selling signal, that means a yes, I'm going to automatically enroll them in the business buying process. That's not what I mean by follow-up. Follow-up is when we get a no. There's no selling signal. Either they politely declined or we got no response at all. What do we do at that point? Are we one and done? We found a prospect, we messaged them, we got no response. We throw that name away? Heck no. We're not going to throw it away after one message. That's the follow-up we're talking about. And so we have to create a follow-up plan. And it's going to depend upon the way we are reaching out, because it would go different depending upon whether we were sending direct letters, email messages, telephone calls, or DMs. Which one is better for follow-up? I'd say the one that leads to the most success. All right, let's take a look at success. If we're outbound prospecting, either you or your team is sending cold, unsolicited outreach messages to targeted businesses. And that's what you do in outbound outreach. But what does success depend upon? I'd say 3 factors. Number 1, how well you targeted the group. We have the right people, the right businesses, right locations, etc. That needs to be taken care of. Number two, your messages have to land. They have to open the email, open the letter, read the message, respond to the call to action, etc. And both of those are important. In fact, without both of them, outbound prospecting really falls flat. But I don't think it's the most important one. The most important one in my mind is timing. We want to time it so that we're sending a message out at the very same time that the buyer has decided to sell. This is the real key to outbound prospecting. You need to catch them at the right time. And luck is a huge factor in catching them at the right time. So if luck is important, what is the best way to handle luck? We just do that by increasing volume and frequency. How many owners that we message, that's the volume, and how often we message them, that's the frequency. But when it comes to frequency, some people have a mental stumbling block. What is that stumbling block? Let me deal with the stumbling block with an analogy that people often make. They compare prospecting to dating. There are superficial similarities, but I want to make an important exception between the two of them. When we're talking about dating and someone gets asked out on a first date, they don't want to go, they're flattered, but they say no. The second request, it's still a polite no, maybe more direct. By the third request, we're getting annoyed. Then it starts getting creepy. We're blocking numbers. We're getting help in terms of how to deal with this stalker. And at some point, looking at a restraining order. I mean, unwanted attention is a big issue when we're talking about dating. Some people I've dealt with, and more than one, which is why I'm including it, think the same thing applies somehow to prospecting. That unwanted attention is something that we want to avoid. It's an awkward social blunder to keep messaging people. I have to talk them out of both. It's not true. It's perfectly fine to send people non-personal business messages on a regular and frequent basis. If they tell us to stop, we do, but if they don't, we keep going. It's not an issue at all. So when you're prospecting, send a request. If you don't get an answer, keep going. Second, third, fourth, seventh request. 14th request. Polite outreach is not a problem. And in fact, it's needed if we want to try and get timing right to handle the luck issue. So go right ahead. So of the three key success factors, I think getting the timing right and dealing with the luck issue is the big one. So I have no problem handling that with frequency. And I will send out a lot of follow-up emails. They're basically pings trying to get that timing right. And this directly relates to follow-up. Because if we're trying to create a follow-up plan, we've got different ways that we can do outreach: direct letters, email, telephone, and DMs. And if timing luck is a big success factor, which we're trying to deal with volume and frequency, we have to ask the question, which outreach method is going to work best when it comes to volume and frequency? Direct letters, that's a lot of printing, a lot of postage, expensive. I don't think so. Telephone calls, connect rates are already low. I don't think telephone calls would work. DMs, no. There is a personal element in there, so the creepy factor might actually come into play with DMs. The only real choice, what's left, are email messages. They're inexpensive. The tech stack available is amazing. We can automate, we can sequence, we can set up drips. The reporting is fabulous. I base all of my follow-up on email messages. I've had the most success with that. The huge shops that I know that really crush it on deal flow all have email-based systems. So that is the one that I recommend. Before reviewing inbound prospecting in detail, I want to compare the two, outbound and inbound. They are, in a way, an inverse of each other. What do I mean? With outbound prospecting, you approach a business, you check for a selling signal. Is the business really for sale? If it is, we start the business buying process. Inbound, we're first checking for the selling signal to see if the business is for sale. If it is, then we approach the business and start the business buying process. That's what I mean by being the inverse of each other. If you're doing outbound prospecting, you are just going through your list. You're checking target businesses, looking for a selling signal. With inbound, how is it different? Well, with inbound, if we have the same set of target businesses, we start off by doing what? By waiting. We just wait until an owner decides to sell. And once the owner decides to sell, we get notified. That's how inbound prospecting works. We get notified, but how? Let me explain the three ways. Number one is direct leads. That's the personal introduction. It works this way. We have a network connection, either personal or professional, like in a friend, an accountant, a lawyer, etc., who knows an owner who's selling a business and then introduces us. What a fantastic way of generating prospects. If you can set these kinds of relationships up, pure gold. The second way, indirect leads. This time the seller contacts you. Why would they do that? Well, the seller is responding to a blog or a podcast, an interview, an event, maybe even paid advertising. Something about your public activities has drawn the seller to you. Another fantastic way to generate leads if we can set it up. And the third one are bird dog leads, where individuals contact you discreetly. These are people with early knowledge of businesses being sold. And you're going to receive a tip only. There's no introduction in this case. But if you get the right person, it can be extremely effective. So, in terms of summarizing the three ways, the direct leads with the introduction, the indirect leads where the seller contacts you, and the bird dog leads where you get the discrete tips, all are extremely effective inbound prospecting methods. But please note, if you are inbound prospecting, it works best for people who can publicly solicit leads. For people with an existing job who don't want people to know that they're trying to buy a business, inbound prospecting is not always feasible, although you might be able to squeeze a little bit in. Let me go into more detail on these three methods. Let's talk about the three ways, starting with direct leads, where you're introduced to the seller. For this to happen, people in your personal network notify you when business owners they know are selling their business. And then they introduce you to that seller and low-key vouch for you. Same thing happens on the professional side. Your lawyer, your accountant, financial planner, etc., they notify you when one of their clients is selling the business and introduce you to the seller and low-key vouch for you. So with personal, professional direct leads, you get two things. You get a seller meeting, that's gold, and you also get a thumbs up from a mutual friend. That can be a powerful combination. Do direct leads work? Yes, they do, but it takes time to cultivate the people in both the personal and professional network. They have to know you're serious as a business buyer. Indirect leads, where the seller contacts you, that starts with a magnet activity you undertake in a target industry. You start a blog, a podcast, an event. You write a book. Whatever it happens to be, focus on high-value content for the target business, one that showcases your expertise. Content is king. It's fairly easy to get a following these days. And let people know that you buy businesses. In terms of paid advertising, I think consistent placement works best. Run the ad continually. I know it's price constrained, so by that I mean take an ad that you can afford to run every single week and make that your limit, but see that you do put it in regularly, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, whatever it happens to be with the property that you're running the ad on. You can change the posting location, but I would not change the ad. Do indirect leads work? I mean, yes, they do. They also take time to build. How about bird dog leads where you're getting notifications only? Let's talk about that. Well, bird dogs are people in the know. They know people, they know situations, they know what's happening, they know what people's plans are. Their job includes high people traffic. They're around people all the time. It's less about the job, it's more about the person. They have a personality. They just kind of have their hands in everything. And when they hear about a business being sold, they let you know and you pay. These are typically paid relationships. Whether you're paying for a notification, an offer letter, an LOI, or only when the business is actually purchased, that's up to you. Could be one of those, could be a combination. But bird dogs, it's notification only. Do bird dog leads work? Yes, they do. If you get the right person, it can be absolute gold. You've probably guessed by now, personally, I am a big fan of inbound lead generation. There's no question about it. Outbound is great. You can get some wins, you can get some quick hits. But if you're taking a more medium to long-term view of business buying, I'm not saying get rid of outbound, not at all, but you do need to invest some time in shoring up your inbound lead generation because that's what's going to pay dividends for you over time. So make sure it's part of the mix. I want to finish this session with a final observation on different ways leads are generated. I want to compare effort-driven to system-driven. What's effort-driven all about? It's about a lot of hard work on your part. You're doing the calling and the emailing. You're sending the letters. You're finding the prospects. You're working the networks. It's manual. It's hands-on. It's effort-driven. And whether you do the work yourself or whether you hire a virtual assistant, it's still a grind and a hustle. It's still hard to sustain, and it can lead to burnout. I've seen it happen. And there's a reason why. We are in a numbers-driven business. So why not try and switch over to a more system-driven approach where we have automated email follow-ups? That's hands-off. We have inbound introductions, hands-off. Bird dog leads, yeah, that's hands-off. Paid advertising, yeah, pretty much hands-off. So it's much more scalable, much more sustainable, easier to track the metrics, and a lot less burnout because a lot less stress and a lot less effort. And I think it breaks down this way. A lot of people start with a more effort driven approach. It's more manual and hands on, but over time, they transition to a more system driven approach. And that's a good goal to have because we can't sustain a highly effort driven lead generation program over the long term. Deal flow is critical. We can't buy businesses without it, but it can be learned, it can be mastered. With a little bit of effort, you can create fantastic results. Hopefully, this video has got us started off in the right way. So let's get after it. This is the Do It Yourself Guide to Business Buying. This is the Generating Deal Flow video. Remember, we want to learn and grow as we go. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.